guys, to GTBank Fashion Weekend 2018. I am extremely elated to present our next speaker to you. Now, a lot of you know him as a TV personality on ANTM. Who knows what ANTM is? Yeah, there you go, America's Next Top Model. But he's also an executive producer, he's an entrepreneur, and he's a creative director. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together. Give him a nice Lagos welcome for Manuel.
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 And you two. And the Lady Gaga impersonation. Do you want me to answer that?
Manuel for your beautiful work.
All right, guys, Grammys. Bring the pose. I'm in the presence of absolute royalty.
Join our hosts, Juliana Rancic and Manuel.
We've got the Glamistrator. Look, power of the pen, people. We could freeze this shot. Whoop, problem right here. He shouldn't have had the water bottle right there. Look at the look on his face. I think he's upset. I think he's a little confused about should he drink, should he not drink? What is in this water? Did anyone put anything in it?
During Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week, if you're not inside watching one of the shows, you're out here scoring some swag.
Yes, celebrities do eat. Okay.
Hey!
Okay.
The one and only Manuel.
The fact that they broadcast this over the internet, to me, that meant that they wanted to embarrass him. They wanted to victimize him. They should take, some kind of accountability. Did you hear what happened? He was all upset because when he landed, his luggage didn't arrive, so he was like bitching about it. But don't they take your luggage away from you? So I don't understand
I
why.
also didn't pass the physical because he had high blood pressure.
Well, there's a surprise.
TV personality, style expert, and just all-round fantastic man.
I am standing here with Kanye West. Is there a bigger pressure walking down this carpet?
Very fashionable.
You really are.
I try. The fashion really is hot tonight, even though the weather is not so hot. I'm Manuel, and we are at the Golden Globe Awards. There's a boomerang though. I hate boomerangs. You see, Diva, this is what happens when you try and get the top star iconic models. They leave. Lagos, Nigeria. Hey everybody. Hi. Oh my gosh. Look at all of your smiling faces. I love that. How are you guys? You guys have lots of energy today. I am so glad that I came here. I love the trip. I've got to be honest with you. When I was first asked to come and speak with all of you today, I was truly humbled, but then nerves set in because I felt this self-imposed pressure to deliver a totally different masterclass than the standard beauty or fashion masterclass. So with that said, let's dive in and take a look at this Insta world we now live in, where we portray our lives on social media platforms through carefully curated and filtered photos. By representing ourselves this way, we are moving away from communicating who we really are. And I read and listen to people all the time on social media giving away their power by crowdsourcing their style instead of self-sourcing it. I mean, literally just giving away their power. And if you think about it this way, what they'll do is they'll put up 4 hairdos and say, well, which one should I get? Or they'll swatch 5 lipsticks and say, well, which one should I wear for that hot date tonight? Or that casting, or that interview. Crowdsourcing your image does more than giving away your power. What it does is it takes you further away from your own truth. And it's time that we take back that power and get on the path to you. Now, I always say beauty, it's deeply personal, purely individual, and yet surprisingly public. And we all need, if you think about it, the way we present ourselves to the world should be a reflection of who we really are. So we need to come back to that place where we self-source our style instead of crowdsourcing it. Now, this ideology also applies to our individual paths to success. And looking for guidance from a mentor often helps us make decisions, but emulating a person rather than an idea takes you further from your own path. And each and every one of you have your own stride and journey to complete. And while many of our lessons are similar, each of us is unique. So if we spend our time trying to emulate that person rather than an idea, we'll at best be an inferior version of our teacher, and at worst, we will never truly find our own path. So before I jump into my own story, I wanted to share my thoughts on just a dirty little word that everybody uses every day, and that word is trend. You've heard that word, right? Probably many times today. So I believe that trends eradicate personal style because it's about redundancy. You know, if you see something enough times, like poof, suddenly it's a trend and everyone wants to jump on board. I never understood why this was so desirable to people who love fashion. Because when fashion was newly forming and styles changed with the era, people found ways to take a designer's changing hemlines and their styles to express their own individuality. And that is what style is all about. And Mr. Dapper Dan, who is speaking tomorrow, he is a genius who followed his singular vision with incredible innovation and uniqueness. Fashion and beauty is about communication and celebrating your individuality. And if you think about it, this philosophy echoes how we should journey along our separate paths in life. But how do we figure this all out? For me, if you don't know this already, the original Matrix films they really are my favorite of all time. And if you follow my Instagram feed, you probably know I have a little dog and his name is Neo because he is the one. Now, during the film, the Oracle turns to Neo and she says, "Know thyself." And yet he still looks to her for validation about his own truth. And this scene in the movie was just so instrumental in forcing me to look at who I really was and question why I was still looking for external validation and who I was trying to become at that time. Constantly searching for validation will destroy your sense of self, and that took me years to figure out. Now, by the end of the film, we all know that Neo becomes the one, but he makes this revelation by looking inward and finally seeing his own truth. And that was where you really see that moment, that light bulb moment goes off because he believes in himself. This is discovering you, standing in your own truth and being who you really are. Now, when it comes to my own story, and seeing as that I'm 46 years old, I can easily look back and connect the dots and see how one decision or seemingly random event was important to my journey. But it's another thing to truly communicate what guided me all along to my own path to self-discovery. Now, people always say, it's remarkable what the mind can do. And what I say is it's remarkable what your spirit can do when you don't listen to your mind. And trust me, I've had to learn that lesson over and over again because my mind can talk me into a knot. And I've learned that limitations in life are just illusions. And my biggest hope for each and every one of you here today is that by sharing my obstacles and struggles, you'll realize that the reality we perceive with our senses is merely just a small portion of reality, masquerading as the whole. And if you believe in limitations, they will be real. However, just imagine what you can achieve when you empower yourself with the truth. And the Matrix films are also a brilliant metaphor for freeing your mind and discovering limitless power. However, it was well before the movie franchise when Albert Einstein clearly and boldly stated the obvious. Logic will get you from A to B, but imagination will take you everywhere. And when you step back and realize that all your power and imagination comes from the present moment, you'll realize that you cannot become successful. You can only be successful. And once that awakening happens, nothing will get in your way. Now, I've been asked over the years how I have accomplished the various successes that people associate and identify me with. And I never had an answer and was always baffled by the question, because at no point would I seek authorities in a specific field to validate whether I was good or not at something. I just had to do it because I had to. And what I did is I would take time to immerse myself in my current passion, and I didn't question why I was doing it. So as that old adage says, if you want success, you must RSVP and show up at all times. Research, study, visualize, most importantly, and prepare. And while that's easier said than done, a few years ago, I got a simple answer to my question about success. I wrote a letter to acclaimed spiritual teacher, Eckhart Tolle. And I asked him because I wanted to find a way that I could thrive beyond the veneer of my work life and my need to break free of that box that I was put in and labeled fashion expert. And his response to my question was just profound. And these were his words: Jay, always give your fullest attention to the task at hand and don't make the present moment a means to an end. And well, honestly, it took me probably about an hour to even figure out what he meant by those two simple phrases. Surprisingly, I recognized that the decisions from my past, where I was driven by the moment and not the outcome, those decisions were the successful, pivotal moments in my life and career. So think about it this way. In any moment, you have two options: act or accept. Take enlightened action to do something, act, or accept the way things are. And life becomes truly just a whole lot easier when you remind yourself of this during times of crises. But being truly present is really where all the power is. So now for a moment, let's just throw on our imagination. We're gonna go way back for a moment and put yourself in my bedroom, little J. Manuel's bedroom at the age of 12. And instead of having posters of my favorite musical artists, what I did was I actually put up the most dynamic fashion ads and editorials that I could find. And by posting these images on my wall, I subconsciously imagined being a part of this provocative and creative fashion industry one day. Now, I spent time learning all I could from watching fashion television every Saturday afternoon, not knowing that one day I would call the show's host, Jeannie Becker, my mentor and friend. Now, you may not know this, but my parents actually got married and moved to the United States from Cape Town, South Africa. And both my sister and I were born in Illinois before my parents moved up to Toronto, where I grew up. Now, with my father being a doctor and my mother a teacher, I naturally geared my schooling towards science, and I had aspirations of having a career in healthcare. And I studied piano and graduated from the Royal Conservatory of Canada. But my intense passion for performing and music was born when I met my first voice teacher, Linda Miller. Now, I had seen her sing in a concert that my parents had taken my sister and I to, and it was that day that I decided I needed to sing and be on stage. Now, being an opera singer is not what I'm known for, and don't worry, I'm not going to sing right now. Forming a close student-teacher bond with Linda established a critical path change in my life. I mean, it was mind-blowing. So let me further explain. When I was in high school, my hobby was photography, and I joined the photography club. And during my senior year, I entered my best photographic work in the National Kodak competition. And much to my surprise, I actually won and came in first place. But what's more, during my senior year of high school, Linda spoke to my parents about taking me to New York City on a weekend trip, and I was going to have the opportunity to sing for her teacher and one of the assistant conductors of the Metropolitan Opera. Now, my parents agreed, and for once it seemed that I was on the right path. Now, I just cannot tell you how I felt during that first trip to New York City. I felt like I was finally home and just one huge, giant step closer to my passion. And clearly I was an artistic type, but I didn't acknowledge that to myself yet. And after a welcoming response from both voice teachers, I made that trip to New York City 4 times that year with Linda as my chaperone. And during that last trip, Linda auditioned and landed the role playing an opera singer in Martin Scorsese's next film, The Age of Innocence. And she was going to start filming just outside New York City that fall of 1991. In the meantime, I had applied to the science program at University of Toronto, but one question just burned in my mind. What if I moved to New York City and went to NYU instead? So subconsciously, I clearly just wanted to be closer to my passion. So I sold this idea to my parents, and I said I could live with Linda and I wouldn't be alone in the big city. So encouraged by my passion and enthusiasm, they supported my change in direction, and I moved to New York. Now, that night before I moved to New York, I had this long talk with my parents. I was laying on the end of their bed because I was leaving the nest, so to speak. And I'll never forget my mom's sage advice. And her words were, "Remember who you are. It is so easy to compare yourself with others, and you'll always find more people successful than you and less successful. And you have to value where you are in your process at all times. And most importantly, keep yourself separate from the brand you create for yourself. That way, when people love the brand, you don't fall for the hype. And then when they try and tear you down, and inevitably they will, your sense of self stays intact." I mean, that's just so powerful. I mean, why do moms always know and they always have the best advice? So at that time in my life, it was both mind-blowing and scary all at once, because on one hand, I couldn't believe that I was now living in the city with this famous tagline of, "If you make it there, you'll make it anywhere." I just had to make it, period. And that wasn't pressure enough, because really there was that friend, we all have that friend, who gave me the advice of, well, keep your return ticket home. And there's nothing like that friend to make you prove them wrong, to work even harder, so they look a fool, kind of. So on the other hand, I was engaged in a flow, and I realized for the first time that, things weren't making sense to my mind. However, I had yet to discover that my mind was going to have nothing to do with my fate. So after arriving in New York, I applied to NYU and I changed my major to music. So just baby steps, out of science into music. And I was now an opera singer, and I studied privately with the team of coaches I'd been working with all year. And I settled into life in the Big Apple as a student. Now, right after Linda started filming The Age of Innocence, the movie studio arranged for a publicity photo shoot with a huge photographer that a lot of you won't know. His name is Christian Steiner, but he was well respected for shooting classical artists and producing album packaging for major record labels. Now, knowing my secret passion for photography and beauty, Linda asked if I would do her makeup for this photo shoot. So, of course, I was beyond thrilled, and I said that I would do it. I mean, after all, I had done her makeup over the years, kind of on the side, learning my craft along the way. And I'm going to be honest with you, there were a lot of messy attempts at learning that perfect smoky eye. Trust me, terrible. But after Linda's shoot, Christian complimented me on my work, and he asked if I would be interested in working with him from time to time. Now, really naive, but graciously I declined, and I was very, very serious. I said, I'm studying at NYU, and I'm going to be an opera singer. So with this considerate smile on his face, Christian gave me his card, and he said to call him if I ever found myself looking for extra work. Now, I know half of you out there are right, like, so how does this all connect to like my big break? So I'm going to just jump ahead just a little bit. Just as I finished up my schooling at NYU, getting ready to audition for apprenticeship programs, fate stepped in. I remember one day doing a spinning class, and we worked out really vigorously, and that night I noticed I was going to bed with some back pain, but it was nothing that I was really concerned about. I woke up the next morning, and I couldn't move my legs, like at all. I was in excruciating pain. I could feel my limbs, but I couldn't get out of bed, let alone walk. So I was rushed to the hospital, and after a series of tests, bone scan, and an MRI, it was conclusive that I had sacroiliitis. And that's basically the spontaneous swelling of your SI joints. And I spent the next 3 months in a wheelchair. And I'm so independent. I'm going to be a little TMI for you right now. I hated being helped onto the toilet and bathed because, the nurse is just all up in your stuff, and I just can't deal with it. But it took me 7 months to learn how to walk again. And honestly, I would never trade that experience for anything in the world. And I truly mean that. Because what seemed like a frustrating year to a 22-year-old was an illusion that I had to see beyond. And that's exactly what I needed. Because at that time in my life, I was not the type of person who would just sit and meditate. Like I was always on the go and more caught up with what I thought as opposed to what I felt about things. And essentially, my body forced me to accept the present moment. And I remember asking myself one night, what am I supposed to get out of this? And so the time that I spent recovering, I let go of all resistance. I became still, and I went to a deeper, more spiritual place. And I finally heard and listened to my inner voice. And in retrospect, up until that point, I didn't realize it, but I was controlled much more by my ego. And my mind had created this illogical fear that working in the world of fashion would be impossible, and it would be an empty cause. And I wanted to be of service to people, really, at that point. So I ran across this quote a while ago, and a long-term mystic said, and this is the quote, "Don't let your mind act as an attorney for your ego. When you're busy convincing yourself that you're right, you're using your mind as an attorney, and it might be logical, but it's never going to be your highest source of wisdom." So now, after spending 20 years traveling the world, working alongside really some of the most talented and innovative creative visionaries, what was once a dream became my reality of working in the fashion and beauty business. But beyond the magazines and the photographers and celebrities I've collaborated with over the years, I've had a chance to work with so many different women whose power and style truly inspired me, and they helped me find ways to support other women. And that career behind the scenes only prepared me for the role that I'm most known for, which is a producer and creative director of America's Next Top Model. And the show allowed me to reach more people beyond what I ever thought could be possible. And I ended up with a platform that allows me to speak about how sometimes working on the outside allows us to heal on the inside. And the way we present ourselves to the world really should, it's like the way we realize our true self-image. So when you think about it, style is so much more than whose name is on your back. And my favorite quote from Tom Ford just sums this all up. And his quote goes like this: "Glamour is more than what you put on your body. It has to do with the way you carry yourself and the impact that you have on others." And I interpret that to mean style is the very definition for the way you live your life and accomplish your goals. Now, side note, Tom Ford is actually my idol, and I have this funny little story that happened well after I had met and interviewed Tom Ford on the red carpet for the first time. So, of all places, we randomly bumped into each other in the bathroom alone in a sound studio in Los Angeles, which is not the place you just expect to bump into Tom Ford. He was completing the music score on his film, A Single Man, and I was there recording voiceovers for Canada's Next Top Model, I believe. And now, every fashion interview that you've ever seen with Tom, you've never seen him speak like this. So that conversation that we had alone, going to the bathroom, standing at the urinal, I actually saw this kind of fiery passion in his eyes as he told me about his dream in creating a feature film. Again, it was just so surreal because I was in the bathroom alone and the door opened up and then I heard Tom's familiar voice going, well, 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 look who we have here. It was just really bizarre. But anyway, as I was saying, I've worked alongside a wide range of women from Jennifer Lopez to obviously Tyra Banks. And I've had the amazing opportunity to work with creative visionaries like Patrick DeMarchelier, Richard Avedon, which was a huge dream of mine, Annie Leibovitz, among many other greats. However, my first famous client, and you guys are never going to know the answer to this, was none other than Luciano Pavarotti. So that's the opera singer, not what you were expecting. I see them waving in the back. Well, you got to see, once I was back on my feet, I called up Christian Steiner, that photographer who shot my first voice teacher, Linda, and he remembered me. And on that call, he asked me if I was going to be free the next week to shoot a CD cover with Mr. Pavarotti himself. And I must have been in just utter shock because I remember this long silence on the phone and Christian asking me if I was actually still on the line. And you have to understand, as a kid growing up and wanting to be an opera singer, Pavarotti was my idol. And I could never imagine meeting him, let alone creating a character look and a CD cover with him. So of course I jumped at the chance, and Christian told me that the Metropolitan Opera would be messengering me his custom lace wig and character references the next day. So I gave him my address and I hung up the phone. Let me just explain something. Not only do I know nothing about styling hair, and still to this day, I'm not a hairdresser, I certainly knew nothing about working with a lace front wig, blocking it, putting it on a form, setting it, and putting it on with glue. So like they always say, and at that time of my life, I was like, fake it till you make it. So I spent the next few hours researching different wig makers in New York. And I set up an appointment to get a crash course in becoming a great wig technician. So when the shoot day came, I had terrible nerves and I just couldn't contain my excitement. And the days seemed to kind of move in slow motion. Have you guys ever experienced that? Because I remember meeting Luciano. I remember showing him the wig, which, by the way, on the side, basically the other technician who taught me how to do it set the wig mostly. And then I kind of remember picking up the bottle of foundation to start shaking it to get ready to start his makeup. But I have to tell you guys this. I'd already mixed the foundation and taken the cap off, which meant I basically, when I shook the bottle, I threw foundation all over, yes, my very first famous client. So I just must have looked utterly, utterly gray because he grabbed my hand and says, "It's okay, calm down, my boy." I mean, it was a disaster in my mind, but the shoot was actually a huge success. And still to this day, the Metropolitan Opera sells that recording of Il Trovatore with Luciano Pavarotti, and every time I go in their gift shop, I see the CD, it makes me smile. But with all these kind of serendipitous events, pushing me towards the world of imagery, I approached a small agency in New York and asked them to represent me as a makeup artist. And I finally chose to live life like it was rigged in my favor. And my aspirations for becoming a musician, my unique journey to New York City, and even the time I spent recovering from sacroiliitis, that unfolded my path to success. And I don't view any of my setbacks as failures. Because, you know, most people think the path to success is like this to this. But it's much more like this, like that. And that's why I love the quote that Arianna Huffington always gives, which is, failure is just a stepping stone to success, and it's never the opposite of success. So after working in the small time kind of makeup circuit and building my portfolio, I requested that my agent send my book over to the advertising agencies because I wanted to work on the big time cosmetic ads. And so my book literally went around to all the agencies and they all said the exact same thing. I had no cosmetic ads in my book, so therefore they weren't gonna hire me. So I was like, this is a catch-22 or what? And obviously this is before social media. So I was just so completely obsessed with this crazy idea that I was driven to create my own, I'll go put it in quotes, cosmetic ads. And fortunately for me, weeks later, I was working, doing a magazine and editorial with Bridget Moynihan, who was a famous model at the time. She's now turned actress. And we seemed to get along really well, and I kind of begged her to do a test shoot with me. And I explained to her how I was trained in Photoshop, and I was gonna retouch our image and lay it out with makeup to replicate the Lancome ads of the day. And she happily agreed, and with her famous face, I was able to recreate these professional-looking makeup ads. And my agent sent my book back around to the ad agencies. So the lesson really here is the test shoot that I created and produced landed me my very first Revlon job. And from there, you know, my name started spreading word of mouth, and I started working with many other different clients. So what I learned from that experience of rejection was just never give up on your dream, because I had come way too far to turn back because of some silly catch-22 rule. But speaking of rules, another quick side note, the very first time I went over to Vogue magazine to show them my work, I didn't know the elevator rule. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Do you ever see the movie Devil Wears Prada and Miranda Priestly gets on in the elevator and the other people run off because she has to ride up to the elevator alone to her office? Well, and I wish I could say I was making this up, but this is exactly how it happened. I walked into the elevator in the Condé Nast building when it was in Times Square, and two people got off as Anna Wintour walked on. I've never met her before. So I rode up to the 12th floor alone with Anna Wintour. I didn't dare say anything. But it couldn't have been too much of a faux pas, because in the end, Vogue hired me for the next several months to shoot their celebrity portraits. And it was during that time that I met supermodel, icon, legend, you guys all know her, Iman, who was looking for new talent to work with. And Iman and I clicked instantly on that first shoot, and a whole new world of opportunity opened up for me. And she hired me for everything she was shooting at the time, and I traveled with her from Cannes to Tokyo. Now, Iman and David Bowie at the time lived about 10 minutes from my apartment, so I was always over at their place getting her ready for various events or appearances. And with her namesake company, Iman Cosmetics, she wanted me fully involved with her branding imagery. So they hired me to do the makeup, creative direction, and the digital post-production. And it was not long after I had met David that he started working on his Heathen album. And hiring me to work creatively with him on this project, it was actually both David and Iman who sat me down in their kitchen one night and clued me in on being paid as a creative director. Because up until that time, most of my clients relied on me to be there for model casting, creative direction on set, and the digital post-production, which I was not being paid for, and that is a creative director's job. So I have to thank them for that advice, truly. And now, you'd think things would just come really easily to me now in my career because, of all the clients I was working with. Well, that's not so. This is a story that I like to tell. The very first time I ever got that call to work with Tyra Banks, it was as a last-minute replacement, and I had to work for free. So Tyra's makeup artist was actually stuck in Los Angeles due to a flight cancellation, and they needed somebody in a matter of just a couple of hours. And she was presenting at the GQ Awards, and all the glam costs came out of her pocket. So she figured if she was testing me that I should work for free. So I had the choice, act or accept. And with no ego and loving the opportunity, I took that assignment. And what can I say? That one free job paid off big time. Because literally just a couple of weeks later, I was on the beach of St. Bart's working with Tyra and shooting Victoria's Secret advertising. And from that point onwards, we worked together all the time, and we became very, very, very close friends. So one morning, and it's really funny because Iman still likes to joke about this. She says, Tyra stole me from her. That's how she tells it. And I got this call from Tyra, and it was 6 a.m., and I'll put that in reference, 6 a.m. in New York. She was in Los Angeles, so it's the middle of the night, 3 a.m., very Tyra. Got an idea, oh my gosh, need to talk. And she wanted to create this show that gave people this backdoor glimpse into the world of modeling. And after months of pitching her idea and many executives and people saying no to her face, only one small US network agreed to her show and paired her with a production company that knew nothing about fashion. Crazy, right? So Tyra asked if I would not only do her makeup during filming, during the first cycle, but she wanted me to use my resources to bring on other photographers and other talent. And it was during the first season of America's Next Top Model that my on-air role of creative director was born. And that was truly instrumental because Tyra insisted, since I was just doing so much behind the scenes that people didn't see, that the show represent my role on air. And with early reality TV in its infancy, people said to me that I was going to be throwing away a very legitimate career in fashion for something that wouldn't last 1 or 2 seasons at best. So after doing 18 seasons of America's Next Top Model, it is syndicated around the world in over 150 countries. And it made me a household name, and thank you. And I became the first non-supermodel to host and executive produce one of the internationally sold shows, Canada's Next Top Model, as well. So I started getting offers to appear on different talk shows like Oprah and E! News, and it was after my first guest appearance on an E! Red Carpet special that I was motivated to pitch myself to the talent executives to be a fashion correspondent for the network. And I literally just walked over to the casting director's office on my last day of filming to pitch myself. And this, by the way, no agent, no nothing. I just thought I could just roll in without an appointment. And I realized in that moment that this was a case of perfect timing because E! was looking for someone to literally fulfill that role. And beyond my co-hosting duties, I ended up hosting a show for them on their sister network called Style Her Famous. Now, here's one of my embarrassing stories. During my very first live Emmy red carpet show, I interviewed Glenn Close, and I am a huge fan of her acting, and I'm literally just obsessed with the movie Dangerous Liaisons. So I made this split-second decision to perform one of my favorite lines of hers from that film live on air. And this was the line, so you can get a sense of how completely embarrassing this was. Her line went, "One of the reasons why I was never remarried, despite a quite bewildering range of offers, was the determination never again to be ordered around. I must therefore ask you to adopt a less marital tone of voice. Well, there's absolutely nothing better than live TV to teach you what not to do. I mean, Glenn Close looked at me like I was absolutely crazy and out of my mind. Thankfully, nobody really remembers that embarrassing moment from my career because it was well before social media had taken off in a big way. But I must have sweat through my whole suit as I tossed back up to Ryan, who was also new to the red carpet team. What I realized was I was just so much more focused on being a successful first-time reporter to the red carpet that I didn't pay attention to that present moment. And if I had focused on what Glenn Close was saying to me, I wouldn't have felt the need to impress her with my memory of her unrelated performance from so many years ago. Do you guys remember those Eckhart Tolle words that he gave me? They basically went, always give your fullest attention to your task at hand and don't make the present moment a means to an end. And he couldn't have been more wise because I was so focused on being a success rather than staying present in the moment to what I had to do, which was simply interview Glenn Close about what she was there to do. So let me ask you guys, how many of you have always wanted things to be perfect? And be honest. Okay, a lot of you. And I'm one of them, honestly. I always thought if I did things right, then I would be perfect and things wouldn't go wrong. Well, that's wrong, and it's completely the opposite of truth. And what I realized is that it makes things worse, and I drove myself crazy. Because every time I wanted things to be perfect, it would get worse. And I realized that I was using my perfectionism as armor so people couldn't find fault with me. And that isn't even logical because you can't please anyone, ever. So nothing at the end of the day is more important than the present moment. And we have to remember that. So remember that the present moment is the only thing that exists in everything that you're doing. And that's where all your power comes from. Now, I've got to share with you guys, and this is how I'm going to wrap this out, one of my favorite books that I've used throughout the years and the way I approach life. And it's The 4 Agreements by Miguel Ruiz. And bringing these 4 simple life lessons into your life, I mean, it'll truly set you free. So number 1, be impeccable with your word. Literally follow through on everything that you say. That will carry you, truly. Number 2, just don't take anything personally. Nothing that other people do is because of you. Because what other people do and say is a projection of their own reality and their own dreams. And when you're immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't fall victim to needless suffering. Makes a lot of sense. Number 3, don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and express what you really want. And we're going to get to questions in literally 1 minute, so cue them up. And number 4, just always do your best. Under any circumstance, simply do your best and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. So you know what? Some days we just need to be our own best friend, especially when the pressure to perform and be successful makes you feel like you're failing. And if you're afraid that just luck won't come your way, please remember just one thing. Luck is simply preparedness meeting opportunity. So just go out there and do you. You have to be kind to yourself and remember that the past is just a story that we tell ourselves. You've got to stay here and now. And Picasso famously said, everything you can imagine is real. So you just have to simply imagine your success going forward. You will have goals and dreams, but you have to allow life to unfold at your own pace. My story, for example, was full of twists and turns that I could never have anticipated, but it brought me exactly to the place that I dreamt about back when I was 12 years old, living in Toronto. So that was really powerful, and that's what I certainly didn't follow the normal rules to success, but that was in my case. I unfortunately was forced into a wheelchair to finally hear and listen to myself. So my message to all of you is, in today's age of social media, where we strive for more likes, comments, and followers, I just want to make sure that you're following the path to you and not living other people's dogma. And you have to think about that gaining enlightenment isn't an exercise in following another person. It's an exercise in following your heart. So I go back to this idea of self-sourcing. Self-source your success, and ultimately, you get to experience you. So thank you guys so much for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jay.
Isoye.
Hi.
She's here. First of all, doesn't she not look gorgeous? Yes.
Thank you. That was really insightful. Now, guys, if you don't take anything from today, ensure you take Jay's well-laid hair. Look at how nice his hair is. This is perfect.
You keep talking about my hair like it's like, I don't know. It's just a lot of gel.
No, but you were saying, because you said you're a perfectionist, or were you saying you're not a perfectionist?
I used to be, and now
Okay.
I've shed that one, because it's like at the end of the day, you can't please everybody.
Jay, I met you yesterday, and trust me, you're a perfectionist. Every little detail. He pays attention to every little detail, and that's fantastic.
Okay.
All right. There's no need for us to sit down because we're going to take questions from the audience.
Sure.
But I have one very important question for you. Now, you talk about being yourself and expressing and living in your own truth, right? Now, we're in an economy, or rather, we're in a society where things are a bit conservative in terms of how you speak, how you dress, how you relate with other people.
Yes.
Now, how are we able to do all of that with those restrictions? How are we able to remain true to ourselves?
Well, I feel, honestly, first of all, you always have to honor your culture. But if you are trying to go out into the global world of fashion and beauty, I always say, honor where you come from, but you do have to be you. And that's not a disrespectful thing, I feel, for any culture. And those standout people in whatever you're doing, whether it's, fashion design or global marketing, or if you want to be a model or a hairdresser, creative director, makeup artist, whatever, you really have to bring innately just that thing that makes you to the table, because that's what's going to really thrust you forward.
Fantastic. Now, you've been quoted as saying there's no such thing as hype. Can you expatiate on that?
As what?
As hype.
As hype, yes. I talked about the word hype. So hype is something that doesn't exist at all. It's not actually real. And I think, if we go back to, again, what my mother said, you have to have this level head in that, thinking that if you do create a big brand and you become a huge success, you have to remember that the hype around that isn't really you. It's not for you. And so you don't want to fall for hype because it's not a real thing, because when you do, and then the opposite happens, because even if you're a genius designer, you might get a bad review or what have you. If you're tied into that emotionally, it's going to tear you down. So it's about keeping that balance. So you keep the brand of you here, and then you know who you are. So you have to keep that separate.
Oh, fantastic. Now we're going to take questions from the audience, okay? Do we have any questions? Oh, I have someone at the back. Can we take a question? I have another question for you, but we're just going to take from the audience first.
We're going to get a mic up there? Okay.
Do you want to sit down?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I'm on heels.
Oh, you want to sit? She's like, she wants to sit down. You got to work.
Okay.
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
My name is Omwa. I have 2 questions. First of all, you said we should learn to separate ourselves from the brand. How do you, for a startup, like a fashion designer that's just starting, how can you do that? That's one. Then the second one is, in this era when it seems that we are addicted to social media, how do we really shut down when it seems like you're not being, or you want to be true to yourself, but social media is giving you so much pressure. And when it seems you're not living up to that, people now term you lazy. how do you shut down? Thank you.
So I'll start with the end of your question first, the social media idea, and see if I'm understanding it correctly. So you're saying there's the pressure in social media to kind of perform, and you have to create something very specific. What I was trying to say and illustrate is where the trend is happening right now. Social media has a double-edged sword. Yes, it can be a very powerful thing, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind that you have to follow your own vision for what you're trying to do. And what's starting to happen is people say, oh, well, this beauty vlogger is doing this and this beauty vlogger, everyone's starting to do this, so people are jumping on the bandwagon of trend. And then what happens is you start to end up with clones as opposed to being an individual to who you are. So yes, there's pressure on social media, but at the same time, that pressure is really self-imposed.
Okay.
You should really do what you feel that speaks to you. And I think that, and you'll find your audience more naturally that way.
Okay, and she also asked about startups because she said...
About what, sorry?
Startups
Startups, yes.
Yeah. So she's saying, how do you differentiate, how do you remove yourself from a business that is just starting up? Since you're saying we should differentiate ourselves from our brand.
Sure. So when you're a startup business, and if the brand is you, and it doesn't matter if it's your name or not, but it is essentially you. All I'm trying to say is, yes, you want to kind of create momentum, and you can put all your passion and all of your time into that. But what you just have to remember at the end of the day, if you don't want to feel those horrible kind of emotions of flux, like up and down, you just have to remember that your work, even though you're very passionately driven by it, it isn't really a reflection of kind of the spirit of who you are. And I can give you a quick example. I'm working on a completely different project that nobody knows about right now. And so one of the things we do is, in our industries, we send it out to certain industry people, and you get that feedback. And what I always remind myself when you get that feedback is that, okay, that person is giving me feedback for the creation, not me. Okay. So that you take your emotion out of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Jay. I have a guy at the back with a question. Oh, that's a lady. The lady whose hand is up at the back.
Thank you very much. I just want to know, because the profession is not very easy. I think there's a lot of stress in it. Sometimes one may think of quitting and looking elsewhere because of the toughness. I just wanted to share with us your worst day, climbing the ladder, getting to where you are now. It will encourage some of us, like me.
Okay,
your worst day.
The worst day ever?
Yeah, yes.
Wow. And what did I do specifically to kind of move forward?
Encourage her.
Yeah, so first of all, the one thing you should know, and this is where honestly I feel truly blessed to have had this opportunity. I spoke about working with all these different creative visionaries and designers and etc. I can absolutely tell you that everyone, no matter how big you think their name is, they struggle on some level at some point. So that oneness that really connects all of our lights and our spirit together is that we all go through the exact same thing. So for me, on a day where I might feel like I'm low, or I want to leave that project behind, or kind of just stop, and I'm thinking of a specific night where I just was like, I'm done with it. I'm done with this thing that I was trying to create. And ultimately, for me, what I did and what I encourage everyone to do is just to remember one thing. As I said before, the past is really just a story you tell yourself. So it sounds very easy to say this, but stop thinking the negative thoughts in that moment, because what's caused you to spiral down is your mind, and your mind is not your heart. So you have to remember in those moments, and everyone falls victim to it, because we think, well, we're hearing this talking in our head that that's us. It's not. So life is this journey, and at the end of the day, it's something, we want to take it seriously, but it's also fun. So if you have a passion for something and it's taking you to this point, why would you turn back on that gift and leave it and abandon it? You want to turn and take it forward. So that's what I always say to myself on my worst day, is just say, well, what do I got to lose at that point? Because if I feel so low, might as well just do it.
We have so many questions from the audience, but we're only going to be able to take 2 because we're running out of time. So, okay, let's have Lola in front, and then we'll have the gentleman in front as well.
Hi, Jay. Your talk was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
You've mentioned that you've worked with a number of amazing people. Is there a trait, or are there traits that they all tend to have in common?
Oh, wow. I think...
Is there one thing or a few things that you see in their success?
I think the people who... Well, first, we'll be honest, when we're talking about this world of fashion and beauty, I always look at this whole business as a business of misfits. Because when you really look at all the people that are part of the business, they're either kind of like the nerdy one, they were the nerdy one in school, or they were the ones that were the quirky ones with this crazy personality and found they were trying to find ways to express it. And so what I've learned from working with such amazing talent, throughout my whole career, is that those people have reached a point where their fear of failure or their dream for success surpasses their fear of failure. And basically they get to that point where they're like, you know what, I just really don't care what other people think. And it's a weird thing because, if you're a designer, let's say, and you're creating fashions, you want people to love them. But at some point, you have to just create what you're going to create, put it out there. It really is about let go, let God, and say,
Preach.
There it is, and I have to let it go. So that's what I've noticed with anybody who is truly kind of ascended. It's an awakening. It's not even about talent. It's about this awakening of like, I'm just going to do what I need to do.
Hallelujah.
I love the question. Thanks.
Pastor Jay.
Yeah.
Okay, one last question, please. Where's the man with the mic? We have a gentleman in front. How many more questions are we allowed to take? No more? No more.
Hey, Jay.
Hi.
Do you remember the next step model that Eva won?
Yes, season 3.
Yeah. What was your reaction to it?
When she won?
Yeah.
Well, we're, in terms of that process, we're all a part of that process. The one thing I can tell people is that when we're judging in that final judging, we're down to 2 girls. And I know it seems like a long time ago because it was, but I have a photographic memory. I remember, there was a really heated discussion, and I always sit on that final panel as a judge. And the discussion amongst all the judges was, Eva has this personality and she pushes through. And I remember we were in Tokyo at the time and we shot this beautiful CoverGirl ad, and she was the one that resonated exactly what we were looking for. But the debate was, is she tall enough to be a model? And the argument really went back and forth about, well, Kate Moss is 5'7", she can model. So we really went back in an argument, and in the end she won, and she's gone on to be a really big success, so that's fantastic. That was the answer.
Guys, we're going to take 2 more questions, guys. 2 more, please. Okay, let's have the lady in red, please. Oh, sorry. Jay, how are we going to handle the audience?
That's okay.
Okay, we'll take one from the back after this one.
Hey Jay, my name's Shedzi. You look absolutely fantastic, by the way.
Thank you.
I love
Thank
your
you.
suit. I'm a presenter. I'm currently here representing Glam Africa magazine. But my question is really around teaming, because up until this point, I've been doing a lot of things myself. I've been doing presenting for a year. But then in terms of building a brand, you need to have a strong team. And obviously you worked in many projects before. So my question is, what do you think is essential. What tips do you have for people building a brand in terms of finding the right team members and maintaining them in terms of their loyalty, their quality, and just maintaining that relationship to ensure that they build your brand well?
Sure. Now, and as a presenter, are you talking specifically in team members in terms of glam squad stylist, or are you talking about co-host, or are you talking about camera operators? Because there are many, because everyone, there are different teams.
Yeah.
They're all important. I want to get the right one.
Okay. So I mean in terms of your brand, so not just as a presenter on a show, as a brand.
Sure.
So if, for example, you're doing things, maybe launching products and things like that. So your immediate brand, so your personal makeup artist,
sure,
your actual manager and things
sure,
like that. What tips do you have in terms of choosing people and maintaining that relationship?
That is a very good question. And I'm going to go back to what I said earlier in my talk. And ultimately, it goes down to your highest source of, what is your highest source of wisdom? You feel it. You know people you vibe with. You know, when you sit down, if you're looking for that core team of people, you'll feel who really works with you. And often, and I've seen this happen many times, sometimes people say, oh, well, I got to work with this person because, you know, she's the bomb and she's going to make me la 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 la. All of a sudden now you're thinking through this decision. And what you're doing now is you're all caught up in your ego. Ooh, I want to be here because this is going to make me look good. And ultimately, if you really want your message to come through, especially as a presenter, it's going to be about who do you vibe with, how do we find that synergy, and those are the people that are going to ultimately lift the project. Because it's always about the energy. It's not about, oh, I got X, Y, and Z on my team, so I'm going to be it. You're kind of trying to rest on an egoic decision as opposed to moving forward. And so many of the great people in our industry have found people that we would call our unknowns. A lot of great designers have worked with people that are their core team, and that is what ultimately lifted that designer and moved them forward. So feel it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Last question, please. One last one, the final one. The lady at the back. Okay. Let's have the gentleman in glasses, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Ali. Finally, I've been able to get the mic. Thank you so much. Fantastic presentation, Mr. J. And my first observation or comment has to do with the issue of trends. Now, we have, I would say, trends in Lagos has risen to very endemic proportions. People follow trends, and they're very fleeting. You know, it's not a very original concept to follow trends. So now, my question is, what would be your advice to people who find themselves a slave to trends, and how do they break out of it? And when it comes to originality, I know that in this dynamic, you have people who are used to following trends, and there are people that are trying to be original, but nobody seems to encourage them to be themselves. So what would be your advice to these people that find themselves in this two extremes?
Exactly.
And, additionally, my question has to do with the business side of things.
5 questions.
Just one more, and it has to do with creative. Okay, it has to do with the creative process. I know that the ANTM franchises that you've been a part of have been very fantastic. They've come up with very original ideas and tests or trials for the models to go through. Do you normally have like a production team or like more like a creative team apart from your production team that comes up with these ideas, or are they just unique to you and you have you just dig into your archive and come up with ideas for them to?
Sure. Those are great questions, and I'm going to stand by kind of what I said earlier in my presentation, which is I really do feel that trends kind of, it really does eradicate personal style because it is about that redundancy. And as I said during my presentation, but I don't believe it was here, Mr. Dapper Dan is right here, and he really is a genius in creating
Dapper
innovation.
Dan in the building, guys. Put your hands together for Dapper.
Truly, walking the path and standing and moving forward and doing your own thing, I think is always going to serve you. Now, if it happens to be, like right now everyone's talking about 80s fashion or what have you, and what you're doing, your vision is something that is somewhat parallel with that, that's fine. I'm not saying move away from it. What I'm saying is don't look at a current trend and just say, this is what I have to do. Because it's that, you really need that innovation to stand out. And another designer that I knew very well and was friends with was Alexander McQueen. He was somebody, even in the beginning, people were saying, no, you got to do this. And he's like, no, I'm going to do this. And you have to follow your own path to create your own brand. And just very quickly to answer your second question, with America's Next Top Model, in terms of the creative, what we would do, like when we do a runway where the girls were walking in water, actually when we were in South Africa, or doing all these kind of different crazy creatives, we did two things. It was usually a conversation just with Tyra and myself, and I would always say to her, we want to keep it rooted in things models are asked to do. So when you see a model, we've done a beauty shot with a big tarantula. That wasn't just for television's sake. That was just a lot of models are put in situations to kind of do something bizarre like that and sell through. So we always wanted to keep it 1 foot in reality, pardon the pun, while also giving the girls these challenges that they are really going to face, walking onto a set. So it was really just a conversation, and then I would work with my team to create and facilitate that vision.
Thank you very much, Jay. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Jay.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming through. Again, Jay, Manuel.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.